This is Samir Vergara from the First Orlando Counseling Center, board-certified addiction counselor, nationally certified Christian counselor. I have my colleague here, Carrie Russo. She is a licensed mental health counselor, a clinical supervisor, and my other colleague, CJ Varghese. He is a marriage and family therapist, and we're doing a very special show for Christmas and for New Year's, for the holidays, which we're going to be talking to some listeners who are hopefully going to be calling in, and we're going to be tackling some issues that happen usually during this Christmas season. Carrie, welcome to our show. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much, Samir. It's a pleasure to be here. I look forward to taking your call and helping you through these questions you may have.
Absolutely. How are you doing today, CJ?
I'm excited because I know this is a tough time of year for everybody. So it'll be interesting to hear what our callers have to say, and I'm going to enjoy our conversation today.
Okay, wonderful. Well, there's a call right now on line one. Let's go ahead and take that call. Andrew, what do you want to ask Carrie, CJ, and myself today?
Okay, so I was calling because I had a question for you guys. And whenever it gets around the holiday times, my brother comes home from college, and it just causes a lot of stress, and everyone's really tense, and it's just a lot of chaos around in my house. So I just don't know what to do to deal with all the stress and everything.
Wow. Okay, so what would you say, Carrie, to this young man?
That's a good question. I think a lot of people are dealing with stress in the holidays, and especially with family members that they don't see all the time. I think that if there's certain traditions that your family's used to, that's helpful. Your brother, has there been a problem before with your brother, or?
Before he went away, he was, every time he was around, it would just cause a lot of stress, but it's gotten worse since he went away. Whenever he comes back around the holidays.
Have your parents considered counseling? Therapy is very good. I want to talk to your parents and have them, call the counseling center, and family counseling is helpful. And maybe, sometimes when another child, another brother or sister asks their parents for help, it's more likely that it'll get done because parents usually want to help their kids. What would you say, CJ? You see a lot of teenagers and
I think it's helpful for maybe even for yourself to find someone to talk to, because sometimes keeping all these emotions inside can leave you really stressed and feel like you can't enjoy the holidays.
Right.
Because it's tough to enjoy the holidays when you have all this other stuff on your mind. So it might be helpful for you to be open and free with someone where it's not a family member, it's not a parent, it's not your brother, and you'll be able to connect with somebody that might be helpful for you.
Okay. Well, I'll definitely end up calling the counseling center then and get help that way.
Let me give you the numbers, Andrew, that you can call. If you want to call the main number, it's 407-514-4470. If you want to call Carrie directly, you can reach her at same area code 514-4469. And for me, it's going to be 514-4476.
And for myself, you can call me at 321-300-6723. That's 321-300-6723.
And obviously for all our listeners, you can reach us at counselors@firstorlando.com, which is actually the easiest way. And we are going to be taking calls today. Even after the program ends, if you are not able to get through, make sure to keep calling after the program. And we're going to be taking calls and seeing how we can help you during this holiday season. So that's a great, question. There's a lot of kids out there, guys, that are going through difficult things. And sometimes we forget, we just think that it's just the parents or the mom and the dad. But a lot of young men, young women, they feel the stress also of the holidays, especially if they have a sibling who, is a little bit maybe unstable. Correct, Carrie?
Well, and what we don't know about this family or this student that just called is what else may be going on. They may be dealing with something like ADHD. They may need an evaluation to
Now, you
find
specialize
out
in that, Carrie. What is an evaluation of ADHD? What does that consist of?
Well, it's various things. If you go look on the website, which most people will search the web, there is no typical just one test for ADHD. it's a combination of a lot of information, gathering a lot of information and finding, fact finding and seeing what's exactly going on. There are some tests that we can do that can lead us to understanding if someone has ADHD or a learning disability or something else, some other kind of problem that's causing them a problem.
Okay, and this is an area that you specialize in, I believe, correct? This is one of the things that you do with young kids?
Yes.
Yeah. What are some signs and some symptoms that, let's say someone younger who's maybe 8 or 9 years old, what are some things parents could be, should be looking for if their son might have, or daughter, ADHD or ADD?
Well, if they have ADHD, obviously the first thing would be they'd be inattentive, but a lot of times you'll find a 9 or 10-year-old who's quite just a little bit sad and depressed and feels like they're not doing well in school. And you realize that they're not the typical ADHD, the one we hear about all the time that's bouncing off the walls, but they're just distracted and they need some help too. And so you'll see them being sad or upset. And when you investigate, it's just because they're distracted and they're losing their place in school. And who wouldn't be upset?
Okay, so this is definitely something important. It can create some issues as they get older if it's not worked on, correct?
Absolutely. And if a child's in college and they haven't been diagnosed, it can really be a problem, or because of all the other things that are going on in college. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and I think sometimes the opposite is also true. Like sometimes they focus so much on things and they can't get themselves out of it.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. They get stuck on.
Okay, well, great advice for all our listeners. Remember, you can also go to our website at firstorlandocounseling.com, or you can reach us at counselors@firstorlando.com. So we have another caller, my panel here today, Carrie Russo, CJ from the First Orlando Counseling, myself from the First Orlando Counseling Center, and we're taking calls and we're responding to questions, guys, of listeners that are going through different issues during the holidays. And
there's a lot of them.
There's a lot of them. We have Stephanie on line 2. Stephanie, how are you?
Hi, how are you? I'm very good.
Welcome to First Orlando Counseling Center radio show. I believe you have a question for the panel today. What is that?
Yes, I have a question about my husband. Lately, he's been locking himself in his study more and more, and I believe he's watching pornography. It really is affecting my marriage in a negative way, and I want to know what I can do to help.
Okay. When did you first notice him starting to do this?
About a month ago.
Okay. So he spends more and more time there?
Yeah, I notice him, separating a lot and going into his study and locking himself in there more and more, and I think he's just getting completely submerged in what he's doing.
All right. Is he isolating from you and the kids at the same time? Is there any kids?
Yes, 2.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Stephanie, for calling in. This is definitely something that we see more and more today. As a board-certified addiction counselor, one of my specialties, it really is, years ago, pornography was a little bit different than it is today. People had to go to an adult bookstore. They had to go in there, buy it. It was uncomfortable for a lot of people to have to do that. But today, because we have this thing called the internet, unfortunately, all it takes is a click, and immediately you're exposed to basically a library of pornography at your fingers.
And it's easy.
It's easy,
and there's no consequence. Nobody knows. You can do it in the private on your phone. We're finding. I know CJ's had some teenagers on the phone that have looked at it. You're dealing with all kinds of people that are looking at pornography.
Right. I think it's also sometimes parents find it very hard in this day and age because their kids are smarter than the parents are in using the computer.
You're absolutely right,
and things like that. So sometimes. I find parents who come in and they're overwhelmed by that, and they don't know what to do with filters and this thing and that thing and how to protect their kids from everything out there.
Yeah. And what I see as an addiction counselor is one of the things that I see, Carrie and CJ, is a lot of adult males are self-medicating. There's something else going on in their lives. A lot of times, maybe there's no intimacy with the wife. Maybe they're not happy at their job. Something is not going well. And they're looking for ways to self-medicate. And I want to explain to our listeners today that pornography is no different than someone who is drinking alcohol excessively or taking drugs, unfortunately. It's a symptom of a deeper issue. The disease of addiction, or the dis-ease, whatever it is you're doing is not really what's not, let's just say it's not the primary situation that's going on. There's always a root. There's always a cause. I see a lot of times people will say to me, Carrie, you know what? I'm at a job. I'm miserable. I don't like it here. And I've been here for 20 years. There's nothing else I can really do because I can't find another job. And when I get home at night and I lock myself in my room or in my study, I have a time that I can tune out. I don't have to deal with my job. I don't have to deal with my wife. And for that moment, I'm important. I'm wanted. I'm loved. And obviously, pornography, like any other addiction, is progressive.
Right. And it feeds itself. So one time you get away with it, it feels good, and you're doing it again. And so that's obviously a problem. Of course, the other side is the wife that finds out and had no idea and feels like it's her issue. I know I've had wives that, the perfect storm is a wife who has an eating disorder, and then she finds out her husband's looking at porn. I mean, wow. That's an amazing, in fact, we've had that quite a bit, haven't you?
Yeah, absolutely. What do you say, CJ?
And I think the other factor in all this is, like you were saying, Samir, about the pain of their job, current situation. The other piece is oftentimes there might be trauma in their history, some kind of sexual abuse, or some other type of physical abuse, or some kind of pain that they haven't solved yet and they haven't healed from. And I think it's important that we deal with some of that stuff so that they don't need the medication anymore.
Absolutely. And it's a good point you make, because not everyone that watches porn has had some childhood issue happen that was traumatic, but the truth is a lot of people do.
Of course, but if they haven't, it's going to be traumatic when their wife or their teenage daughter walks in on them. Suddenly now they have a trauma.
Absolutely. And what Stephanie, I know you're listening to us, Stephanie, and one of the things that I hear you say is, my husband, 2 kids, and pornography affects the entire family. If there's any men out there listening that are struggling with this issue, we highly recommend that you seek help. This will not go away on its own. Unfortunately, like Carrie said, because of the availability, you can be in a parking lot waiting for your wife to come out from a store, and you can be on your phone watching stuff that's inappropriate. One of the first things that people have to do when they have any issue is take that first step. And sometimes it feels like monumental, but once you take it, it's going to be a relief. Come in, seek counseling. We have 12 different counselors at the First Orlando Counseling Center. Carrie Ruzzo, licensed mental health counselor, clinical supervisor. CJ, who specializes in family issues specifically, can help you in this situation. And myself as a board certified addiction counselor. We have different numbers. We have 514-4470. That's our main number. They're all with the 407 area code. We also have, if you want to speak to Carrie directly, 514-4469, myself, 514-4476, and CJ, 321-300-6723. You can also reach us real easy at counselors@firstorlando.com, or you can go to our website, firstorlandocounseling.com. CJ, being a licensed marriage and family counselor, what would you suggest to Stephanie on the marriage part? Sometimes it's tricky because you'll call a girlfriend, you'll call a family member, and they'll say, leave him, get away. And obviously we know from a counseling perspective, that's not always the best solution. What would you say to this woman?
Well, I think first thing is she has to deal with how all this makes her feel, because obviously you find out your husband is looking at pornography. Now, that says a lot about, hey, now all of a sudden you feel like, well, am I not good enough? That can lead to depression. And so it's important that, you come in, talk to somebody about figuring out what's going on with you in terms of what is this causing you to feel like,
Yeah, because if the wife isn't dealing with how they're feeling, that's just if they're reacting in anger, that's just going to further push their husband to go in that room and find an escape again, and that's what we don't want.
Absolutely.
And that's why it is important to seek both, I recommend both counseling and an addiction counselor because, there are issues that you're dealing with that are
Absolutely.
And then we have the addiction.
And you're absolutely right, Carrie. One of the things that I do with the clients when they come in is admitting and being myself in recovery for many years and going down that road. I understand that the hardest thing for someone to do is to accept. To accept what? To accept you're powerless. That your behavior is destroying you. It's destroying the people you love. Basically, one way to look at it is instant gratification for long-term pain, Carrie.
Yeah, and also I find that with pornography specifically, I know that as counselors, we say there's no difference between alcohol and drugs and pornography, which addiction, but pornography can hide for a lot longer. Alcohol, if somebody's abusing alcohol or drugs, eventually you're going to see their behavior change. Whereas pornography, because they can hide, I feel like it's not as big of a problem.
Keep it going for a
it's
longer
not
time.
And they can lie that it's to themselves. It's really not that big of a problem.
Right.
It's not that. I only looked at it once today. It was only for a couple minutes.
Exactly.
And they don't realize, and like what you said is so important, they don't realize, they don't want to accept that there is a problem.
Absolutely.
And so...
And you're absolutely right about that. And one of the things about porn that is so difficult is it's almost like cigarettes. When someone wants to stop smoking cigarettes, you can stop just basically at any store and get the cigarettes. People smoke, even here in Disney World, you'll have people smoking cigarettes. So it's real difficult when you want to put them down and it's so readily available. You're right. Alcohol and drugs seem to produce a different kind of beating upon the body and the spirit and the soul of a human being. Pornography produces the same beating, but it's a little bit more insidious. People get away with it. People can mask it for a longer amount of time. It almost feels like, listen, I'm not doing anyone any harm. I'm not hurting anyone. I'm not, going out on the street and buying sex. So I'm going to be okay. One of the things that porn does, which correlates to other addictions, is the same symptoms. When it comes to the serotonin starts going, the dopamines, people feel that initial rush prior to watching the pornography, just like a drug addict going to buy drugs, But afterwards, the plummeting is exactly the same. People get depressed. People feel emotionally disconnected, low self-esteem, and inability to relate to the opposite sex. CJ.
And I think also, it's partly because they think that they're doing good to themselves by giving them something good, like, oh, I'm going to look at pornography because I'm so stressed. But at the end of the day, what you realize is they're actually hurting themselves.
Absolutely.
Because, it's like if I told you you're going to meet your best friend and every time you walk away from that experience, you're going to feel horrible. We're like, well, question this friendship,
Exactly.
But this is like every single time you walk away from it, you feel horrible. You don't feel good about yourself. But yet, so it's obviously it's not a good thing.
It's not a good thing. And being counselors, and we work for First Baptist Orlando, which is here on John Young Parkway. You've probably heard of our church. It's the one that does the singing Christmas trees every year. So it's a big church. We've been around for a long time. But let's bring a little bit of the Christ component. What would you say, Carrie, to a spouse like Stephanie that just called? Biblically speaking, what can we say to this moment? To this woman, that she can find some help in Christ and in the Word of God?
Well, the first thing is, because you said earlier, people would say, just run, leave your husband. The first thing is the marriage is sacred and it's a covenant, and you're committed to your husband. And this is a husband that has an issue, in that sense, no different than another addiction. He needs help. It's not about that wife. And so spiritually, it is a time to reach to your other Christian friends and to reach to the Word of God. In fact, just last night, I was talking to a friend who was just obsessing over a situation with her husband and and wondering where he was and what's he doing right now. And I said, you've got to just pick up Scripture, find Scripture to cling to and memorize that, and find friends that you can share that piece with. I don't know what.
What do you say, CJ?
Well, I think, obviously God is our strength, and he's the one that we tend to rely on. And he's a really good resource for us when we're in difficult situations. And I would tell Stephanie that, she needs to surround herself with godly wisdom and, godly counseling, so that she doesn't react impulsively and make rash decisions that
Right.
not just affect her life, but also affect her children, family members, everybody else,
And forgiveness
Yeah.
is a really important piece, that she does understand to be able to forgive her husband.
Absolutely. And one of the important things about what you guys are saying is, biblically speaking, we have to be real careful, because sometimes we'll go to even people that are believers, and because there's a certain anger, fear, they'll say things which in the end will not work out in a positive way for your marriage. So it's good to take not the advice of so many people. When you hear 10 or 15 different voices, you'll go crazy. That's why it's so important to come in, find a therapist, and listen to one person who is a trained professional like Carrie, like CJ, like myself, that can help you. And you can listen to one person and you can hear the voice of God through them. Not that everything we say is written on stone, but at least it will give you a possibility to have a more objective answer to whatever decision you make. Correct, Carrie?
Yeah, and it is amazing. I don't know if, I'm sure you guys have had this experience, but I know that in my own life, I've been reading something in my own personal spiritual walk, and I'll sit with a client and they'll tell me something, and I look at them and say, well, let me tell you something I just read today, and it's
Right.
for this person, and it's amazing to me. It's a God touch in my life, I feel like, when God has given me something that I didn't
Right.
expect, and then it's you're able to use it, with your client that very, in a situation that came up that day.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and even some clients I've had where we've prayed about certain situations where sometimes you can't change the other person involved in the
Wow.
party,
Wow.
So then, we pray together to see that God move, and we believe that God can move, mountains.
Absolutely.
So guys, we believe that prayer works, correct? That is
Absolutely.
and listen, recently there was a Time magazine article, and it was talking about depression and how people that have faith recover 50% faster than people who don't. Now, that's not to say that they're not going to a doctor. They might need some antidepressants, but faith is a very special component in our practice. Now, you don't have to be Christian to come and see us. I mean, we were not going to impose any sort of religious belief on you. But if you want us to pray for you, if you want us to go a little deeper into the spiritual aspect, we will go ahead and do that. I know CJ deals in spiritual matters. I do also as a nationally certified Christian counselor. I know Carrie does that, of course. And
I think every counselor in our office, they better comes from at least a standpoint. The basis is Scripture.
so we will be able to
We're
offer
all
them
trained, right? We're all trained as counselors in the state of Florida and in the United States, but we all are coming from that basis of Christian principles from the Bible.
So let me ask you a question. What makes a difference in your practice when somebody, and not to put any other counselors down or secular counseling, but when you use the Christian component, what do you think makes a difference? How long have you been in practice for, Carrie, by the way?
This is my almost 20th year
So you've been
working with counseling.
20 years in practice. So, and you've been a Christian for how long?
Let's see. I am.
So was you a little girl?
Yes, I was fortunate enough to be raised in the church, and so came to Christ when I was 11. Was baptized by my grandfather, who was a pastor.
So you were brought up in just in
was.
First Baptist Orlando, correct?
I absolutely.
When it was in downtown Orlando, and
I was.
So
I've
for a
been,
very
I've
long
been with
time.
the church for a long time. Done
so
some
you've
things out of
seen-
my own, counseling out of my own.
you've seen some
Worked with
miracles,
quite a bit.
right?
Absolutely. But one of the things you talk about with Christian counseling being different from that of traditional or mainstream counseling, we were talking about God being CJ was talking about God being our strength. It's so important to be connected. I mean, God created us to be connected to one another, to other people, and He created us to be connected to Him and have that relationship with Him. And so I think in having that extra connection, that's an important piece.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
And we have such a great resource, right? I mean, we have the family of believers that surround us that, because when you're in crisis, you need support. And so that's such a key part of
Absolutely.
building relationships and having that component as be a part of the solution. And like Samira was saying, we are professional counselors first, and then we try to share with people based on their liking. If they believe they're believers and they want that to be a part of their solution, then we try to incorporate that as well, because we don't want to deter anyone that might not believe in God at the moment, or the faith is not a part of their
Yeah, we don't push anything on anyone, and I'm glad you say that, CJ. And one of the reasons I asked Carrie how long she's been in this field, and it's because a lot of us, as counselors, we have many times in our own lives, life shows up. And a lot of times we pick up from things that have happened in our own lives, and we can use it under the umbrella of Christianity to help someone else, That's one of the beautiful things about being in this field, correct, Carrie?
Yes, and when we're talking about having the body of believers, one thing in our society today, of course, is social media. I was just thinking about being connected. And so many people think that being connected is, in social media is a real connection. And we're finding that more and more people that are connected on social media have a higher rate of depression. They did a study and had people who were depressed, people that were depressed, and they had some of them on social media, some of them doing just some counseling, and then others doing nothing. And the ones that were on social media actually did the poorest as far as getting better. Those that isolated themselves actually did better than the ones on social media.
Yeah.
Not that we're recommending you isolate yourself, but it's a false sense of connection, which is scary.
We're almost being voyeuristic, I think, in our social media kind of connection, because we look at people's updates and, we're looking at what's the latest picture and all this stuff, but we're not actually meeting anyone. We're not actually sharing our lives. And a lot of times when we put up what we're putting out there, it's all the highlights, right? The positive things. How many times do you see a Facebook post of me and my wife are fighting, and I'm going to put a picture of that out there.
Right, absolutely, yeah.
It's funny you say that, because it's the allure, just like the addiction of any substance, the allure on the top, it looks really nice, but if you look underneath, there's a lot of loneliness, depression, solitude. We were talking about, Carrie, the other day, how they have a new clinical term, which is called IA, which is internet addiction. And you're absolutely right. I had a client many years ago who came, and what she explained to me was all her friends were in some other part of the world, her best friends. So one is in Japan, the other one is somewhere in Sweden, the other one somewhere in England. And I asked, what about here in Orlando? Well, not really. I just don't find anyone here to connect with. So think of how lonely that can become when you're running home, and what you're doing is you're running home to get online and talk to someone who's somewhere else in the world, because you have no one to see face to face.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think people are actually forgetting how to relate. I mean, I have teenage clients who don't know how to have a conversation.
Absolutely.
They find it easier to text someone or to email someone, but or to have a Facebook update rather than having real conversation. And what does that look like?
Wow.
And, things like that. And then they feel disconnected from their parents and, their other relationships, because like you were talking about before, Samira, is like, you can't have intimacy unless you actually connect,
All right.
Face to face, not just online.
Face to face.
And
thank you.
the problem with the internet addiction is it doesn't have to, people think, oh, that's just porn, or that's just something they're doing that's wrong on the internet. No, it can look healthy. Like, oh, I'm encouraging a friend in California who's having a problem with their marriage. No, but you walked out of church or out of school or wherever you were next to all these people, and instead of talking to people next to you, you look down at your phone to...
And we see that all the time, everywhere, not just, in church, but anywhere we go. Okay,
everywhere,
we have another caller on line 3, but before that, I'm going to give you the phone numbers again. 407, and it's 514-4470. That's our main line at the First Orlando Counseling Center. You can go to our website, Carrie, which is probably the best place, firstorlandocounseling.com. You'll see all our counselors, all our bios, and you'll get an information about exactly what is it that each one of us does. Okay, Julia, how are you?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
How is everything going today?
So far, so good. Excuse me.
Okay. Where are you calling us from, Julia?
I'm calling from Castleberry.
Okay, Castleberry, Florida. Okay, wonderful, wonderful.
Yes, Florida.
Okay, you have a question for Carrie, for CJ, and myself. What is that?
Yeah. Well, I have a sister who tends to drink a lot of wine during the holidays, and it always seems to turn into some sort of altercation that carries right through to New Year's, and it destroys everybody's mood. She just ruins the holiday for everybody.
Wow.
Is there anything that you could suggest that I might be able to do?
Okay, so let me have Carrie, licensed mental health counselor, respond first. What would you say, Carrie, to Julie on line 3? What would you say to her?
Well, the first thing I would say is, has anyone confronted your sister? Has anyone talked to? You would need to get the family and talk to her, or sometimes it just takes somebody talking to the sister and saying, "Hey, do you realize that this is causing a problem? It seems like, you drink and then you get frustrated with everybody around you, or you're just a little more agitated, or you go in the other room and you're sleeping the rest of the day."
We try that, but she's in denial. She just doesn't believe it's happening, and she gets angry. And makes her even more angry.
And that's hard too. Go ahead, CJ.
And sometimes it's hard to find, how do we speak into somebody's life like that? I think it's important, maybe if you can find someone that she is close to, that she trusts, that she would be open to listening to. That might be a good start.
Absolutely, absolutely, CJ. One of the things, that sometimes I do with my clients, and it's a little bit difficult, guys, is when somebody doesn't want to stop. What do you do then as a counselor, me specializing in addictions? What kind of tools can I implement to have this person take a look at their lives and just start pre-contemplating, maybe not even contemplating yet, but pre-contemplating the idea. And one of the things which is good is to have that person look at their own track record. I can try to convince you of many things, but you will probably not listen to me, but you might listen a little bit to you. And one of the things that I would recommend to you, Julia, is maybe do a mini intervention. Maybe you can sit around with other people in the family and have a very small letter written to her about what her drinking is doing to harm the family. But at the same time, at the end, saying, listen, we're not going to make you do anything you don't want to do. We're not going to make you stop drinking. But honestly, take a look at your life. And if you can tell us a little bit, anything that you feel that alcohol is doing to harm you, why don't you share that with us now? It's amazing how just admitting 10, 20% of a problem, it might take some time, but it starts to open up the door towards a solution. I know in my personal life, it took many years. It wasn't overnight that I admitted that I was powerless, but many people intervened, and I started to look at my life and I started to accept that just maybe they were right. Correct, Carrie?
Right. And I know one thing you talked about at one point when we were sharing stories is that you went to quite a few counselors, and until you found, it wasn't necessarily the counselor, but it was when you were ready.
Exactly.
And so it may be that getting the sister to talk to someone, even if, when she's ready, she's going to start to make a change. But
sometimes there might be boundaries or barriers that keep someone from actually getting counseling, and sometimes finding those barriers. Hey, you know what? I don't have any money.
Right.
I need some support. So sometimes as a family member,
right,
the best thing you can do is come around and say, hey, you know what? We really love you, and we want to do whatever is possible to get you the help that you need. And so I've had clients come in because they had a parent or a friend who was willing to, or a company sometimes, step in on their behalf and say,
right, and actually say, hey, we've had people call and say, hey, I'm paying for this person's,
exactly,
for the next 10 sessions for this person. I don't have to know anything about them. I just want them to come in.
Exactly.
Will you do this? And we're like, absolutely.
Exactly.
We'll help them and work with them.
And I'm glad you said boundaries, because the family member has to put some boundaries for also. You don't want to enable this person to the point where, it's just going to be a disaster. One of the things that I tell family members is you can raise the bottom. If you know someone's going to touch or hit a bottom 10 years from now, why not have that bottom occur in a year?
Sooner.
Maybe you need to
Absolutely.
take away some privileges, some rights. Maybe one of the hardest things is to say, listen, if you're drinking, you're not welcome. Oh, well, what am I going to do? And where am I going to spend Christmas? Well, I am so sorry, but you cannot come and spend Christmas with us because it's going to disrupt the family, especially if there's kids. Sometimes there's crying at the end, sometimes screaming, sometimes the police come at 2 a.m. So the boundaries are so important. As a family member, you have to take a look at what you've been allowing to happen and how much of this is actually helping your sibling. Correct, Carrie?
Right. And at first, when you do that, it's going to be very, very difficult. But when that person, that friend, or the sister in this case, realizes, oh my goodness, I don't have anywhere to go. So all the people that love me say this is a problem. I don't have any friends to go to, or maybe they have one friend, but eventually that's going to unfold as well. And so that's one more step to them getting help when they start realizing that the people that love me, that care about me, are wanting this to stop, and they're saying it's a problem, and now it's so bad that they don't even want me around.
Yeah, and as a marriage and family therapist, I feel that sometimes, there's so many components that have to come together. Meaning, there's there's the parents, there's the children, there's all these other pieces that
Right.
The whole family is affected. And so. Sometimes we look at the one person that's having the drinking problem, but we're not looking at the causes,
Right.
because they have a poor relationship with their father, or because they have a poor relationship with
Some
their sibling.
trauma that happened.
Yeah, or some trauma. And so there are other factors that play into, hey, this person is really struggling. Because at the end of the day, we talked before about the pain issue, is that they're actually trying to solve a pain by going to alcohol. Or
Absolutely, CJ. It's a good point because, what I always see is everyone is self-medicating. There's something else going on, and it can be anything. It's funny because you can look at someone and you can say, he has it all together. They have the kids, they have the car, they have the wife, they have the husband, they're a great job. But inside, if something is not well, it's not well. And this is where we come in, CJ as a marriage and family counselor, Carrie Russo as a licensed mental health counselor, myself, Samir Vergara, as an addiction counselor and Christian counselor. What we do is our job is to uncover those layers that you have put on top of this situation for years, and now you're using a specific tool. Alcohol is one of the most dangerous drugs that are out there. It's very similar to pornography in the sense that it's legal. A lot of people never think they're going to get a DUI. They never think they're going to get in an accident. Mm-hmm. This time of year, we encourage our listeners, if you drink, please do not drive a vehicle. Call a cab. Have someone who can drive you, or better yet, if you don't have those things, you can't afford a cab, don't go at all. Drink in your own home if you must. This is the time of the year where fatalities increase by 30 to 50%. A lot of people get in a car, they've had 3 or 4 drinks, they think they're fine, and it's clinically proven, psychologically proven. Your response when you're drinking alcohol is 3 to 4 seconds less than you would if you were not drinking. So by the time you see a car cut out in front of you, you might put your foot on the pedal, and it might be a little bit too late. By then, you've had an accident. Correct, Carrie?
Absolutely. We have people coming to the office right now that have a similar situation, and now the dad's not there anymore.
Wow.
And, so that dad who thought he could take a few drinks and it wouldn't be a big deal, took a few drinks and then looked at a text message on his phone, and he's not there. And now we're dealing with a whole nother situation in counseling with these children and wife that now from one little drink, we now are missing a person for the holidays.
Wow,
We're missing someone for the holidays.
And I would say that don't suffer in silence. A lot of times people who are, even if one person is drinking, all the other pieces are affected. So even for myself, I grew up in an alcoholic home.
Wow.
And my dad used to abuse it, and because of that, it affected my life, it affected my mom, it affected my siblings. And I honestly wasn't able to get the healing I needed till I went to a Christian counselor, and I was able to get the healing that I needed in my life, so that I can do what I do now, and to help people and to encourage people to know that you can do life differently apart from what you experienced growing up or what you experienced in the lives of other people.
And that's a good point. And I like what you said, CJ, because a lot of us, CJ, myself, and a lot of counselors that work with us have had their own therapeutic process. And there's nothing like having been there to deal with a situation. Not that you have to, but it gives you a different scope on the situation if you've lived some of these issues. And I can say that, most of our counselors have. And it's a great thing to come back years later and be on the other side now of the table, helping people. Just so you know, all our listeners, this is the First Orlando Counseling Center, our special program for the holidays. Make sure to come to our website at firstorlandocounseling.com. Make sure to visit us at counselors@firstorlando.com. Carrie Ruzzo, First Orlando Counseling Center, CJ, licensed marriage and family therapist, myself, Samir Vergara, certified Christian counselor, certified addiction counselors, and many others that we have. Tammy Matthews, we have Cynthia Knowles, we have Holly Rockefeller, we have our wonderful and amazing founding director, which is Charles Bell, who we probably wouldn't be here without his contribution to getting this counseling center started almost 30 years ago. So we come from a legacy of counselors, correct, Carrie?
Absolutely. And when you talk about people looking and thinking that everybody has it all together, that family has it all together, and they don't know the underlying issues. I think all of us at the counseling center have seen the families that do. They say it looks like everything's okay, and so there's a stigma. They don't want to come to counseling. It's embarrassing to come to counseling. I encourage people to go to counseling before you even have a problem. Go and just talk about personality styles, and that's one of the things we do. Sometimes when you have a big change, like, for example, a child is going away to college or a child is going to kindergarten, there's feelings in that family. Come and talk to a counselor. Have a couple sessions just to talk to a counselor about the feelings in the family. Because then when you do hit a larger issue in your family or in your life, you already have somebody that you're connected to that you can reach out to.
Yeah, Carrie, I think that's an important point. I think you realize people only come in, a lot of times I only see the clients once they're in crisis.
It's really bad.
The husband and wife wants to kill each other, or, there's some addiction has blown up, or, something, it's too late. And then once that, it's harder to put it back together. As you've seen, Samir, it's hard to put it back together once everything blows up.
Absolutely.
So preventive care is very important. In the early stages of problems, somebody to raise a hand and say, "Hey, let's get some help."
Exactly. Just like if you're going to an MD and he says, "Well, listen, your cholesterol level is a little bit high. You don't have to wait till you have a heart attack to tackle that issue. You can start tackling it early on. Maybe you need to do something specific, and that will save your life." No difference than counseling. Okay, we're running out of time, but we do have one last caller. We have Sally on line 1. Sally, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
We're doing wonderful. What part of Florida are you calling us from?
I'm calling from Windermere.
Windermere, Florida. Wonderful. So, Sally, you have a question for our panel today. What would that be?
I do. Recently, my husband left, and just with the holiday seasons coming around, it's just really hard to cope with things. And my kids are asking, where he's been, and just coming back, and I don't know what to say.
Wow. So let's start with the female. What do you say, Carrie, once again?
We've certainly heard that story over and over again, haven't we? Unfortunately, yeah. And it's very difficult. I mean, the most important thing is obviously to find friends and people that are constant in your life and in your children's lives, and to find that, support that you do need so much in the holidays, and to try to keep things as normal as possible while still explaining to your kids that things are changing. But honestly, the most important thing is really to take care of yourself. And in taking care of yourself, it would be to seek a counselor and not to feel bad when you need a break from the kids and you need to regroup and think through what to do next. Go ahead, CJ. You had something to say?
And also, I think it's important that, you remind yourself that it's going to be okay. It's a tough situation right now, but it's going to be okay. You're going to make it through this this situation, and your children need you. And sometimes all these changes at once can be really overwhelming. And it's hard. It's like Harry said. It's important that you find ways to take care of yourself. And the other thing I would say is the temptation is we want to know the why, right? Like, why did this happen? Why did this happen to me? And sometimes when you sit alone and try to figure that out, that can really consume your mind. It can
be very consuming.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's important that you don't get caught up in that, because it's going to drive you crazy just trying to figure out that why question. What's wrong with me? Why did this happen to me now? And where is God in this picture? And things like that. So, and I hope so that you can come in and figure out who one of our counselors connect with.
Absolutely. One of the things that we encourage our listeners is to pray. Have faith. We see many times, Carrie, we've seen in our practice, and CJ, how families, couples who we say somewhere in our mind, might say, well, this is a hopeless case, but something in our spirit says, well, it might be hopeless in human terms, but it's not hopeless in God terms. And there's a beautiful verse which we use a lot, which is, it might be impossible for man, but it's not impossible for God, for the Lord. So we've seen couples that even do get divorced and years later remarry. And that's one of the things that we do. We will pray for you. We'll keep you in our prayers. We will help you find some spiritual peace, the peace that surpasses all understanding. Because there's a time when, as much as we want to help people as human beings, we are powerless. And there's situations that are so traumatic that we really need to rely on the power of God, Carrie.
But the helpful thing is we go beyond, prayer is important, but we definitely go beyond that. We don't think that everything that's happening is because of a spiritual issue necessarily.
That's correct.
There are things that have happened in everyone's lives that predispose us to certain thinking styles that make us, look at things differently than we should. And so we do have the expertise that can go beyond prayer. Prayer is important, absolutely, but we want to go to that next level and give the counsel that you need. Yeah, the professional help that some people need. For example, just the other day, CJ, you had somebody that needed some testing, and they did some testing, psychological testing, to try to get some answers, to a basic, a problem that looked insurmountable.
Difficult, yeah.
So.
And I'm glad you said that, because we all are professional counselors, but we also utilize, if you allow us, the power of God to just pray for you. We keep you in our prayers, but make no mistakes. If there's traumas, we will try to uncover those layers, take a look at what it is. And it's one of the things that makes us a little bit unique. Correct, Carrie?
Absolutely. The fact that we can do both, that we have people who specialize in, of course, addiction, with how many years now have you been?
I myself, Carrie, have been 16 years in recovery. 16 years since I've had to have a drink by the grace of God and His mercy.
And so together in our counseling center, we have hundreds of years of experience with everybody combined. But that's the important thing, is we do have that experience and the training. But then on top of that, we come from a Christian base.
Last thoughts, CJ, before we wrap it up today.
I think to our caller and all those who are going through difficult situations, I think it's important that you don't stay in silence. You seek out help. Find the resources. The resources are available to you. Try not to solve this on your own, because that's not how God designed us to live in
Absolutely.
isolation.
Right,
So it's important that you learn to connect, find the resources so that, your tomorrow can be a lot different than your today is. So it's important that you do that.
I agree. But
Absolutely. Well, we are at the end of our program. We still got a couple of minutes left. And one of the things that we want to touch on to finish this program is to let you know that as professional counselors at the First Orlando Counseling Center, you can contact us. Kerry, CJ, and myself, Samir Vergara, we are going to have our phones readily available right after this program ends in case you want to contact us, in case you want to set up an appointment. The main number is 407-514-4470. If we are tied up with other callers, leave us a message. We will get back to you. That is certain. The second number, if you want to reach Carrie Ruzzo, First Orlando Counseling Center, licensed mental health counselor, clinical supervisor, 407-514-4469. My colleague, CJ, you're going to have to forgive me.
Varghese.
Varghese, okay. CJ Varghese. It's so easy, but I keep forgetting. All right, CJ Varghese. He is a marriage and family therapist, counselor, specializing in this arena, among other things. You can reach him directly at 321-300-6723. And myself, Samir Vergara, board-certified Christian counselor, nationally certified addiction counselor. You can reach me at 407-514-4476. Better yet, just go to counselors at firstorlando.com, or you can visit our website at firstorlandocounseling.com. I'm looking at an email here, Carrie, and in the email, it's talking about people that have what we call, from a clinical perspective, seasonal depression. They get really depressed during the holidays. Can you explain to our listeners, Carrie and CJ, what that is and what are some things they can do to find help?
well, it's interesting because here in Florida, people think that we don't deal with that because usually seasonal affective disorder is much more prevalent in states where we don't get sunshine and we don't get cloudy days. But it does exist in Florida. It does exist here in sunny Orlando, and it a lot of times does have to do with the holidays, Christmas, and every year Christmas is one more mark of what you didn't do. What didn't you accomplish this year? Oh wow, it's Christmas. Last Christmas, last New Year's Day, I thought I was going to be 20 pounds lighter. I thought my marriage would be better. I thought we'd have a baby by now. There's so many things that we make mile markers, and Christmas is one of those things.
That's a really good point, Carrie. I think, and for a lot of people, it's a reminder of their past. I'm going to have to see my dad that,
Absolutely.
I don't have a good relationship
or my
with.
sister that drinks all the time and drives me crazy, or my brother that abused me when we were kids, and now he has his kids, and I don't know what to do. Whether I should tell his wife or tell his kids, or maybe it was just exploring. What do I do? I mean, that's a common question, unfortunately.
Or even with one of our callers that called in about finding out about porn or about the separation, or this is the time that it happened. It's almost like an anniversary.
Right, exactly.
So it's important to remember that it's not always a joyous time for everybody. We always think Christmas is the happiest time of the year, but a lot of people might not share in that same joy because it's a reminder, like you said, about their past, mile markers, things like that.
A reminder of
Absolutely.
that negative thing that happened, and it's not fixed.
And sometimes people are truly clinically depressed. And we have a marvelous doctor, Dr. Keith Fenham, at the First Orlando Counseling Center. And he is an MD, and he's also a licensed mental health counselor. And he might be able to help you in this arena if he sees there is some true clinical depression. Some people end up needing antidepressants, and there's a stigma behind that if you take an antidepressant, you're weak, there's something wrong with you. But clinically speaking, as therapists, that is not the case, correct, Carrie?
Absolutely. You know, if we go to a doctor and he says that our liver enzymes are not right and you need to do X, Y, Z, we're not going to question him. But yet, if there's a chemical in our brain that may not be working appropriately, then we may need some medication. And sometimes that comes from a trauma. When we're traumatized, or when even just sadness, can increase your stress levels, which then does change the chemical makeup of your brain. And sometimes counseling along with some psychotropic medications is what is needed.
I think the important part is that relationship with the counselor allows you to sort out the difference between, hey, is this just situational? Is it just a psychological, if I make changes in my life, will this fix it? Or do I need actual medication to solve this problem? Because we actually work really well as a team,
exactly.
Of counselors and even with the doctor, and we try to figure out, hey, is this a chemical balance? Is this a situational problem? Is this something that needs to be taken to the next level? So that relationship with the counselor allows you to have a really good evaluation.
Exactly. And sometimes people they might be a little bit tired. They might feeling a little bit lonely. They might have issues going on in their job. And it doesn't necessarily mean you're clinically depressed. But some people are, truly depleted of serotonin, which is one of the things that our brain produces to, give us pleasure. And when it gets really low, it's kind of difficult to get that naturally. And that's when it might be a good choice to get on antidepressants. But obviously, you have to go to a physician in order for him to diagnose you and make sure that is the case. So once again, at our counseling center, we have a great physician, Dr. Keith Fenham, and he can definitely help you in this situation if it's something needed.
Well, and what I find is most of the doctors and we work with other psychiatrists as well in the area, most of them want to know that someone's been to a counselor and talked to a counselor. I mean, I spend at least a few times a week that I'm talking to a psychiatrist or a medical doctor that wants more information, and they want to know that person they're giving medication to is getting help.
So we will refer them, correct? Even if maybe at our counseling center they can't find the specific counselor or the specific, in this case, MD. We have different MDs that work with us, and we can refer them to them, correct?
Absolutely. We don't want anyone to be coming to us and we're not able to help them. We want to get them the help they need. And sometimes they may need some medication just short term while they're working with a counselor, while that situation's changing.
Yeah, and I find that to be true. Is like the way I look at it is like sometimes a client is literally just drowning, and you're trying to do counseling with them, and they just can't. They can't handle it. So it's important. Hey, you know what? We're gonna put you on something short term just so you can breathe. Take a deep breath and get your emotions in control, and so that we can actually do some work to figure out, hey, why is this happening? How can we solve this problem?
Okay.
And when you talked about drowning, one thing I often say when somebody's going through, needs some counseling, usually, the person that needs counseling has then been angry with, especially in a marriage, they've been angry with the other spouse, and that spouse doesn't know how to deal with their anger. And so that spouse then begins to drown. And one thing I say is 2 drowning people cannot save each other.
Absolutely.
And that's why it's so important to seek a counselor.
Right. That's even biblical, right? You can't ask a blind man to guide you. It's impossible. Well, we've come to the end of our show today, and it's a marvelous show that we've had with Carrie Rozzo, First Orlando Counseling Center licensed mental health counselor, clinical supervisor, CJ Varghese. Thank you, CJ Varghese. I almost had it there. CJ Varghese, marriage and family therapist, and myself, Samir Vergara, certified addiction counselor and board certified Christian counselor from the First Orlando Counseling Center. If there's anyone listening in Spanish, we're just going to tell them real fast in Spanish, por favor, llamen al Centro de Consejería de First Orlando Counseling Center al 407-514-4470 o comuníquese con nosotros at counselorsconsejeros@firstorlando.com. I thank you so much for being here with me today, CJ and Carrie. We wish everyone a wonderful and safe Christmas. a marvelous and blessed new year, and you shall probably hear from us shortly. Once again, we are going to have our phones on, so make sure to call us. Take care, God bless, and stay safe.